What would you do if you received two separate pieces of information, 48 hours apart, that would completely and utterly change your life as you knew it? I'm Mia Friedman, and you're listening to the No Filter podcast. Real stories about real people that you will not be able to stop listening to. In April 2016, Elle Halliwell was going about her life as a fashion editor and showbiz reporter at the Sunday Telegraph. It was very glamorous, certainly from the outside. She was 30 years old, she was fit, she ate healthily, and she only drank on weekends. She was by all means completely normal. But then one morning at work, she got a call that would change her life.
So my GP comes over and he sits us down and he says, Elle, it's not good. You've got leukemia.
And 48 hours later, Elle found out she was pregnant. And all of a sudden, life and death were both living inside her body and her head. Her story became national news. Should she keep the baby and save her life, or risk her life for her unborn child who might have to grow up without a mum? Confronted with this impossible decision, Elle decided that for her, the best decision was that she was going to keep the baby, even though it meant having to delay the treatment that would most likely save her life. I'd obviously heard about Elle. We work in similar industries, and I'd read her work in the newspaper, and I'd seen her on TV, and I'd heard her on the radio. She's a real triple threat, and there aren't a lot of those in the industry. Someone who can have a career on radio, television, and in print. I can't think of too many people like that. So it was just so lovely to meet her. I think that talking about this stuff is obviously still really fresh, and there were times that she teared up, and there were times that I really felt like I wanted to give her a big hug. But she's got a great attitude. She's very positive. And again, I don't mean that to sound like a judgment and that you have to be positive if you have cancer and you have to have a great attitude, and if you don't, then somehow that's your fault. I imagine she has terrible days where things are very bleak, but I just found the way she was able to articulate how it's been for her and how it is for her going forward with those two things happening inside her, you know, both the motherhood side and the cancer. And we talked a bit. It was really important for her to make it clear that she is pro-choice, and that for anyone listening to this who might have to face this decision in the future, she is not suggesting in any way that you make the same decision that she's made. And for her, in hindsight, it seems to have been the right decision. But other people make different decisions, and she's completely supportive of that. And it's really something that you need to discuss with your family and most importantly, your doctors. Here's Elle Halliwell. So Elle, tell me about the most interesting 48 hours of your life.
It does start with a bout of gastro. So we're going to become...
As all good stories do.
That's right. I was actually at a ATC press thing, and I was like, oh my God, I have
need
to
a toilet.
Go really soon. I had the sweats. Anyway, I'd been to a French restaurant before, so that probably explained why. Anyway, the next day I was like, I'm too sick to go to work. Might be too sick the next day. I'll go in, see my friend who's a GP, get a doctor's certificate. And while I was there, I was like, I'm going to get a couple of blood tests because I wanted to make sure that I had the right folate and vitamin D, because I've been taking a bit of Elevate, because me and my husband were thinking this is going to be the year that we start thinking about trying for maybe having a baby. Like, we were refusing to commit to anything. So I had some tests and they came back with high platelet levels. Had no idea what a platelet was at the time. So he said, look, it's probably just from the gastro. Come back in another 2 weeks, get some more tests. So I went back and they were higher. And he's like, it's not normal, but I wouldn't worry about it. So I'll refer you to a haematologist just to rule anything else out. I said, fine. 5 weeks later, go and see the haematologist.
Are you the kind of person who has health anxiety and freaks out and goes and Googles high platelets? What does it mean?
Really badly. And that's what I did when I first found out about the platelets. And a few things came up that I was like, oh my God, that's a bit hectic. But then I was like, but it can't be because I don't have any of the symptoms. I don't have any bruising. So I ruled anything really serious out pretty quickly. So when I went to the hematologist, I was fine. I felt a little bit tired, but
Who doesn't?
Who doesn't these days? That's right. And so the next day after I'd gotten these tests done, I went into work, and in my mind I was just thinking, I had this story about how we were going to map all the models and the stylists and stuff at Fashion Week, how many steps that they did. So that's it, all that was in my mind was like models walking. And I get into my desk and I've got my coffee and I get this phone call literally at like 9 a.m. from this woman from the doctor's office. And I was like, oh my God, that's not good. Like, you don't get called literally the second day if nothing's wrong. So I started to panic already. And I called her back and she was like, oh, Miss Halliwell. I think she was just the receptionist. And she said, we've got an appointment that's come up first thing Monday morning and we're going to need you to come in. And can you bring like a family member or a loved one?
No.
I had to wait 4 days? What?
That's
to get told something that's clearly
cruel.
bad?
Yeah.
So cruel. So I had a meltdown at my desk. And then my husband, I went home because I was just so distressed, didn't know what was going on. And he called up the doctor, our GP, and said, mate, like, we're not going to just kind of
Wait
sit
for
around.
4 days.
Yes, that's a whole weekend of worry. And he said, so can you figure out what's going on? So I'm lying on the couch just like refusing to Google anything because I was just like, I just don't want to know. When it's really, really serious, I don't think you really want to go there. But if it's just like a little cold, you think, oh, yeah, I'm definitely going to find out if I've got cancer.
Yeah.
And so he goes, look, I'm going to come over. I didn't know any of this until like literally 5 minutes before he arrived. So my GP comes over and he sits us down and he says, Elle, it's not good. You've got leukemia. And that was just, I couldn't even comprehend it. I just like, when he said that, I just felt like, you know, when the black goes out at the end of a movie and it closes in, and I felt like I was falling in this like dark tunnel and I could just kind of see his lips moving. And then he said something else, I don't know what, blah, blah, blah. And then I looked over at Nick and I could just see him trying so hard not to lose it. And so was I, because in my mind I was like, oh my God, we've got a guest. You know, don't fall apart. Like, should I ask him to get him some water? Yeah. And I was thinking, I think that was a way of me coping. Just going, what am I going to... And I was like, trying to mentally get him to leave. And I was like, I don't want to hear any more. Just get the F out of my house. And then it felt like about 2 hours that he was sitting there explaining something to me, and I can't remember what it was. And then literally the moment that Nick shut the door, he lost it. Like, I've never seen him so devastated. And that made me lose it. And we just sat there for, I don't even know how long, just crying. Because that was like, that felt like that was our whole lives gone, when it literally felt like it was just starting. So that was the beginning. That was day one.
Okay, so that was day one. Gosh, the gastro is looking like a high point at this stage.
Oh, yeah. God, give me gastro any day of the week. Yeah, and then the next day was very much, that was probably even harder, because that's when, you know, you have to call people that you love and say, I got blood cancer.
Did you Google?
I still didn't Google. And the journalist in me was just like, find out, do this, you know.
How much did you know about leukemia?
I knew that kids with leukemia died. That's what I knew. I knew that all of their hair fell out. They, you know, were bedridden for months, and then that was it. And I was like, I didn't even really think about adults getting leukemia. It's not something that I really thought about that often.
And also, how does leukemia even work? Like, it's not a lump. It's just... It's in your blood, right? Like, I don't even understand how that works.
It's your chromosomes. So 2 of my chromosomes split apart and reattached in the wrong spots. And
when?
I don't know. It must have happened pretty recently before, because I didn't have many symptoms. And they don't know what triggers it. I think the biggest risk factors are being like over 60 and male, and like working at a petrol station or being exposed to like petrol. Wow. So I didn't tick any of those boxes. So it was a complete shock. But see, I still at this point didn't know what the hell I was dealing with, and I didn't want to know. I just wanted to hide in a hole. Whereas it was my husband who was the one that's like, nah, we're going to find out exactly what we're up against. And 2 weeks before, we were out at dinner with some friends and I'd bought a double pack of pregnancy tests because I was like, I want to have a drink. But we hadn't been completely cautious and I was like, I just want to rule it out.
Yeah.
So it was at Hugo's Manly, actually.
Pregnancy tests are addictive, I swear. They're really addictive. I had such a pregnancy test habit.
Really?
Like, for a long time.
Yeah?
Oh, it just seems like such a big thing to be able to know just by doing this little thing.
Yeah, it's so true. Like a little plastic stick that can change your life.
Yeah.
Like a wand.
So you had some in the drawer?
Yeah, and so it had turned out negative. So, you know, I'd had a few drinks, had a good time, and I had this spare one. And I was kind of thinking about, I think, the Monday morning when we had to go with all these questions and things like that. And in my mind, I was like, oh, could you imagine? Like, could you imagine if something like, and I was like, no. And then I started to think, oh my God, what if it is? And I thought, look, I'm just going to rule it out, do the test, and then I can kind of just move on with my life and what's left of it, you know.
There are always two ways to take a pregnancy test, hoping it's negative and hoping it's positive. What did you hope?
Negative. Absolutely negative, because I literally just thought that's just going to mean that, you know, we're going to have to get rid of that complication quickly. And so when it was positive, I just felt like if I hadn't felt sick before, I felt so much worse. Whereas my husband was bizarrely not that upset about it. And I couldn't understand. I was like, are you serious? I've got blood cancer and you think that a pregnancy is going to fix it? Like, this is just the worst case scenario that you could possibly be in right now.
Why was he happy, do you think?
He'd been doing a bit of research that next day and finding out a little bit more about CML, and he'd seen this YouTube clip of this woman talking about cancer and pregnancy, this particular cancer, and she'd mentioned a couple of cases over in Europe where women who had been pregnant, but we didn't know how far into the pregnancy, and actually had a baby. So he kind of thought, oh my gosh, this is going to be great.
We'll have something to look forward to in this cluster.
That's right. And I think...
But you just saw the cluster.
Exactly. And I think to my detriment, looking back, if I'd done a little bit more Googling, which doctors say you shouldn't do, it might have kind of put me in a better place to kind of not completely just rule it out. But in my mind, that was just not happening.
But I mean, those two pieces of information, to even learn one of them in a lifetime is huge. To learn two of them within 2 days, no matter how you feel about them, no matter whether you're happy or sad to be pregnant, it's still a huge thing to get your head around when you still don't even know what you're grappling with in terms of the leukemia.
That's right, exactly.
So don't be too hard on yourself.
Thank you. But yeah, I mean, you spend your whole life kind of trying not to fall pregnant too young, and then you find out when, you know, the only time of your life when you actually would be excited about it, and you're devastated. Like, it was such a crushing blow to me because I was like, I felt like the universe had just given me a big F you. That's how it felt. I was like, what the hell did I do wrong lately or in my past life or something to get something this crap happen to me?
So you got through the weekend and you turned up at 9 a.m. I hope you gave a filthy look to the receptionist when you walked into that doctor's office.
She's actually really lovely. I felt really bad.
But that is a very uncool thing to do. Maybe, I mean, clearly she made a mistake, but that should never happen.
And surely. It happens a lot. I've heard on at least 3 occasions that, you know, the same thing has happened to somebody else and they've said, sorry, we can't get you in until 2 days later. You think you can't
bring a loved one.
You can't tell someone that without, like, saying, come in straight away.
Bring a loved one and some Xanax, but can't tell you more over the phone.
Yeah, you're going to be too in shock to drive home.
Yeah.
But, yeah, we'd love you to just come in a week or two.
Yeah. So you walked in and sat down with that doctor.
Yeah, and look, the great thing about having had my GP there on the Thursday was that by the time the Monday rolled around, okay, yes, we'd found out that things just got worse. But then we also had another day to process it and then come on the Monday armed with a gazillion questions. So I actually was in the right frame of mind that I could understand what he was saying and I wasn't clouded by the shock and the emotion. So I almost feel like the medical system should do something like that, where they've got someone that you trust who can come to your house, break the news to you gently, and then the next day you go and see someone who's got all of the information. So anyway, we came armed with all of these questions and, the haematologist answered them. We recorded everything on my phone so that we could go back, if
That's
before
smart.
that we wouldn't have even thought about it. So we just bombarded him with questions. And
At what point did you tell him you were pregnant and how did he react?
straight away, and he swore. And he was in, his late 50s, 60s, very mild-mannered. And so when he said that, I was like, oh, okay, that's not a good thing.
You write in your book that he said, shit.
Yeah.
Which is not what you ever want to hear any doctor say.
No, that's right. That was when, in my mind, I was like, oh, okay, well, that almost made my decision done right there. Do you know what I mean? Because I've always been someone who's really respectful of authority. If someone says, do this, and I know that they know more than me.
Well, he's a doctor.
Yeah, that's right. I go, oh, okay, you've got my best interest. And he did. But I had a different interest at heart as well. So he was basically ready to kind of book me in to
Did
have
you
a
say, what should I
termination.
do? And he said, I think you should terminate.
Yeah. He said, you're my patient and I've got to look at your best interest and the safest way to do this, because we don't know how these drugs are going to react, because they're such new drugs, that the sooner we get them, you on them, the better chance you might have of having a baby down the track.
You write in the book, you made a list of pros and cons about your particular type of cancer. And you also talk about you had to do a maths equation because you had to say, right, so if I terminate, then I have to wait until I get my next period before I can then harvest some eggs.
Yep.
And then you worked out, well, that will be several months before I can start treatment, which is only like a month or two before the baby would be born if I continued with this pregnancy.
Exactly.
So that was interesting maths to do.
Yeah, and I spoke to Nick about it, and that was kind of his thinking as well. And I could see how excited he was about being a dad as well. And I think that just made me feel more determined to at least really get an idea of what I was looking at. And it just seemed really, pardon the French, f***ed up to abort a baby in order to freeze eggs to have another baby. And so from a kind of ethical, moral perspective, I just didn't know whether that was something that would impact my mental health almost worse. Do you know what I mean? And make the cancer worse. So, I had to kind of put it out on paper. But I also, looking back, you kind of notice little things, and I kind of feel like in my gut, I was planning to do that and to keep the baby. As much as I was kind of also thinking no, my gut was like, just.
Were you looking for someone to tell you what to do? Because, anytime a woman has an unexpected pregnancy, most men are usually very careful with saying, I will support whatever decision you make. And you're like, no, but what do you think?
Yes.
Was Nick like, because, yes, it's choosing between his wife and the box potentially.
That's
like
right.
The better chance of survival if you were able to go on the drugs straight away versus the unknown.
That's right. And yeah, he definitely helped with that decision. And in my mind, I also thought, think about it, your body is going through, like it's battling a cancer that's running through your blood. Pregnancies, there's like a 1 in 4 chance that you're going to lose your baby within the first 12 weeks. And I'm battling cancer. In my mind, I thought, if this baby lasts that first 12 weeks, then I got to kind of give it a chance. But in my mind, I thought there was such a high possibility that it wouldn't. So I thought maybe we do a wait and see those first few weeks and then just take it step by step. And it was funny as well. Everyone in my immediate family that I spoke to had an opinion. Well, Nick's parents were very diplomatic and they're like, whatever you guys choose. My dad's like, oh, you're keeping the baby, aren't you? I was like, Dad, you're so insensitive. But that's why I like him. He's very much, straight to the point. Whereas my mum was like, you can't keep the baby. You're my baby.
Yeah.
So that was confusing.
What was your dad's thinking?
So in the book, basically, my mum had to make a similar decision to keep me or not. And when I was speaking to my dad, he was like, there's no way I would have let your mother terminate you. And I thought, oh my God. And that, I think, affected my decision a lot, because Mum had a health issue, which meant that she could have died if she kept me. And she and Dad made the decision. Well, she did. And then Dad backed her up after he found out that that they wanted to keep me and risk Mum's life. And they did. And so I kind of thought, Mum made that kind of sacrifice. I don't know if I could not do the same.
Did you think about what it might mean to not be around? Because your doctor told you that at any stage your cancer, which was chronic myeloid leukemia, could go to the acute phase, in which case it became life-threatening.
Yes, I did. I mean, I wrote a will, and one of the most devastating times around that period was when I actually sat down and I thought about what would be written in my eulogy and what people would say about me. And it really affected me, because I thought, are they going to just read out my bio about me being a fashion writer and, what seems like a really cool job? But I was like, but hang on, how did I affect people's lives? And was I a good person? And did I live by my values? And that was really what probably... that was the biggest life-changing thing for me, was realising that I felt like I'd moved so far away from the person that I was into kind of this person that was living life for everyone else, for the recognition and, to fit in and do all that kind of stuff. Whereas I felt like I'd lost myself on the way. I didn't feel like I was the kind of sensitive person that I innately am. Like I was trying to be someone I'm not, to try and compete in, the world that we're in, which is so hectic.
And your career, you were good at what you did, and your career rewarded you for your talent in terms of you were an extraordinary triple threat. I mean, nobody is that, where they have a career in print, radio and TV all at the same time. You were benefiting from your skill and your talent, but I guess it felt a bit empty to you.
Yeah, it was at the expense of birthdays and weddings. I can't count the amount of birthdays that I'd missed, birthday parties, engagements, away weddings, because I worked Saturdays, and I'd always put my work first. And I look back and I go, that's probably one of the biggest regrets that I have, is always putting career at the top of that list. And I kind of made a vow that if I was going to get through this, all my priorities would shift around. And it's hard. When you're still working, it really is hard to it's hard work to maintain that perspective.
And those boundaries.
Yeah.
What was it like during those 9 months when you weren't having treatment to be so close to both life and death? Not close to actual death, but having these twin forces literally inside you. The cancer that was trying to kill you and the baby that was trying to grow inside you.
It was so confusing, just emotionally. So you'd go to one doctor's appointment and you'd get tests for your cancer, and then you'd be sitting surrounded by people that were literally going through chemo, and some of them looked like they were this close to death. And then the next day you'd be sitting in the maternity ward just across the road with all of these happy families and these beautiful pregnant bellies, just going, this is really weird. It was just very strange. And there was a couple of occasions where I actually got the appointments wrong, and so I'd end up in one spot and they're like, oh no, sorry, you don't have an appointment here, you've got one with the cancer specialist.
It's not baby day, it's cancer day.
That's right. And so I'd go from these really kind of exhausting, blood
heavy
tests, and then you'd have the midwife talking about seeing the heartbeat and stuff. So it was really just these emotional highs and lows were so overwhelming. I can't really explain. But the great thing was, during that time, my work had given me a lot of leeway, and so I could kind of focus on dealing with that. And so I had time to kind of process it all a lot better. And while at some points I wanted to just keep working really hard so I didn't have to think about it, it was also good because I needed to do a bit of soul-searching every day and kind of, I guess connect and,
Did you have a counsellor or a therapist that helped you through some of that time?
No, and I should have. Like
Yeah, you should have.
I look back and I thought that I could cope so well.
Wow.
Like there were very few occasions where my family saw me cry, because the first day that I had to tell everybody about the cancer, when I told my mum and I heard her voice break, that, and seeing Nick as well, that was so soul-destroying to me. It was almost worse than finding out about it. And it was almost like my body immediately just said, shut off your emotion, because if you're not emotional, then they don't have the right to be sad in front of you. And so I put on this brave face because I was trying to protect myself, I think, from that emotion. And so I think I almost tricked myself into thinking that I was fine, because I constantly had to go, Mum, it's fine, I'm good, look, I've got up today and I'm, everything's going to be okay. And I look back, and especially when I was writing the book, all of this emotion started to pour out of me, and I realised how much I really should have spoken to somebody to go through all of the issues that I'd been facing, that I think I'd kind of, I don't know, just shoved in a corner because it was too distressing. And then also speaking to, my family and how they felt at the time as well. Like that was, I think that they probably would have appreciated if I'd been a little bit more open and emotional, because they could have dealt with it too. And I think I just tried to pretend that everything was okay. And while I do say as well, my anxiety disappeared, the mental health issues didn't. So I was no longer feeling that pressure, the anxiousness that I was so familiar with my whole life. But it was a sadness and a melancholy and a worry that I didn't address. And this book definitely helped. But I think it's going to take a long time for me to properly process it all, because I think I'm not fully in the clear yet. And I think once I kind of get to that point, if I get to that point, that's when I'm going to be able to kind of go, okay, let's tackle this.
But it's a little bit like motherhood itself. You start off thinking, when I get to 12 weeks, I'll just be relieved, because then I can tell people, then the chance of miscarriage goes down. And then you go, if I can just get to the next ultrasound, then I'll be okay. I'll stop worrying. And then if the baby can just be born, and then if the baby just gets through that, and you always think, and my eldest is 20, and I'm here to tell you
it doesn't end.
You never go, well, look at your mum. Like she got a phone call from her daughter who's 30 saying, I've got leukemia. Oh. You never go, okay, I'm in the clear, I don't have to worry anymore. Yeah. And that's just motherhood. Yeah. So let alone having cancer, I don't want to be a bummer, but I don't know if you'll ever get to that point of, right, okay.
Yeah,
glad that's behind me. Yeah. It's kind of like, I don't know if closure ever exists when you've faced a life-threatening illness or you've become a mother, and you did those two things in parallel. So the fact that you even went into this with anxiety is almost unbelievable. But then the fact that you didn't have those symptoms so much when you were facing it.
Yeah.
How's your anxiety now?
You know what? It's so much better than it was, and it completely disappeared for 18 months. And I noticed that in the last few months, as I've kind of tried to get back to a bit of normalcy, I can see it, like I can feel it creeping in now and then. And I'm like, but it's great because it's not there yet. And it's now a nice little reminder that I need to tackle it head on and start to kind of work on my brain and kind of getting back into that focus and not letting the little urgencies of daily life drag me down, if that makes sense. So at first I was like, oh my God, it's gone, great, cool, no more anxiety, brilliant. But it's, as you probably know, it's always there, like a little old friend in the background going, I'm just still around here.
For that 9 months, I suppose you couldn't really unscramble the egg of which are my pregnancy symptoms and which are my cancer symptoms.
Oh, absolutely not. I couldn't figure it out. I was just tired all the time. That was probably the worst part of it. And yeah, it was hard. But the thing that because it was such a slow-growing cancer and they'd found out about it early, they kind of said, look, you probably won't get any severe symptoms until you get to that next phase, if you do. And I think because I was getting so tired towards the end of the pregnancy and I was on this new drug, that drug was old, but they weren't using it for people because I had this fandangle new drug, but I couldn't take it because I was pregnant.
So it's the interferon that you couldn't take when you were pregnant?
I could take the interferon. So that's what I was taking. I was injecting myself once a week, and then I had to go on the TKIs as soon as I had the baby.
Okay, so had you not been pregnant, they would have put you on that other one straight away?
Straight away, yes. And that's the life-saving drug that they've only discovered in the last 10 to 15 years.
And while your cancer isn't curable, that will keep it dormant.
That's the hope. So the longer that I'm on it, the better chance that I have of maybe going off the drug and it not coming back up. So the aim is to get to undetectable. I'm not there yet. But every 3 months I go into the doctor's office crossing my fingers and hoping, I'm just going to see zeros. I'm going to have a big party, I think, when that happens.
Can you get to that point?
That's
is
the
it
aim.
possible?
Yes, absolutely. And quite a few people have gotten to that point, stayed undetectable for 2 years, and then gone off the drug. And about 50% of people will be able to stay off the drug forever. And the other 50% of people, it will return. So they've got to go back on the drug.
Why would you ever want to go off the drug?
Side effects, and it's a big commitment. I have to fast twice a day for 3 hours and take the pills if I miss a pill.
So it's an oral form of chemotherapy.
That's right.
And so the effects, you've got to fast. What are the other side effects?
It's really interesting because everyone's are so different. And some of the symptoms that I had when I first started taking it, like really bad skin rashes, fatigue, the bone pain, things like that, some of them went away, a bit of hair loss as well. They were really severe in the first few months. And then my body got used to it. But then in the last few months, my immune system's really not great. Certainly not going to ever be the way it once was. So with the immune system, my phosphorus levels are low. I've got anemia at the moment. And that's just a result of the drug. So it can you're never really free of the symptoms until you go off the drug. So ideally, I'd love to just not be able to think about my cancer ever again. That's kind of where I'm at, why I'm thinking undetectable is the way to go. But look, it's a fine price to pay for staying alive.
How's your fertility been affected by the drug?
We won't know, but I can't fall pregnant if I'm taking the medication, which is why I'm so impatient to go off it. But it's kind of like the clock will start when I hit that zero.
So you're not done?
No.
Having babies?
I hope not. But at the same time, I'm so grateful for having one. What a blessing. But there is a chance that I might be able to have another baby. But I've got to stay undetectable for 2 years before I can try going off and trying for a baby.
When you have a baby, for most women, that's when a real sense of your own mortality sets in. And a lot of women, myself included, that's when I became very scared of flying. I was fine flying before, had a baby, because it's that idea of I'm going to leave my child, like it's primal.
Yeah.
When you think about your cancer coming back now, it's a different equation that you have to look at now, isn't it? The idea of having another baby. You've actually got Tor, your son, that could be affected by this desire to have a baby that doesn't exist yet.
Yeah.
Is that different to when you were deciding, should I terminate this baby? So many things.
I've never really thought about it like
good.
that.
I'm glad I made you think of it. Sorry.
You're right. I guess because it seems so far away that I just it sounds like a lovely thing to happen would be to give him a son, a brother or a sister. But yeah, it's definitely something that I would have to think about.
What about doing what Sally did and harvesting eggs and popping them in someone else with Nick's sperm?
That's something that I should think about.
Then you could just harvest them so you wouldn't have to be off the drugs for 9 months.
That's true. Well, that's another thing that I've been thinking about, but I still have to get to negative before I can try. And look, I could be 40 before I, get to that point. And then I don't know, is that going to be not too late, but will I be a different person then? I don't know. It's such a unknown future. And I think as well, like being diagnosed with cancer, you don't think about the future as much as you used to. I'm certainly not as ambitious as I was. Do you know what I mean? Like I want to do things and I want to be active and achieve goals, but I'm not thinking about 5 years' time. I'm kind of thinking about next month at the latest. And I think it's just an automatic thing because for so long I kind of just wasn't thinking that there was going to be much time. In my mind, like for the first few weeks, I was like, I'm going to die. Like, and I'd kind of almost resigned myself to the fact. It was a very surreal kind of thought process. Like, as I said, I really should have seen someone at the time. But since then, I've just always been in that habit of just kind of not thinking too far in the future. Because if I do as well, I get really upset because I just think of Tor.
Once you decided to have him and proceed with the pregnancy, did anyone try to talk you out of it?
No, which was nice. I think people didn't know enough about what was going on to make that decision.
After you went public, though, because they did a story in your newspaper,
yes, of course.
and then you did 60 Minutes.
Oh, yeah. I mean...
And you talk in the book about some people, you know, it never ceases to amaze me who the trolls will go for, but people thought it was a good idea to call you selfish and reckless.
Yeah. People love to have a good old debate, like literally just in front of everybody while I'm watching what's going on. And I'm like, wow, do you guys know that I've read these comments? And Mum was really upset because she's very sensitive, and being in the media for so long, you kind of take it with a grain of salt. But, you know, it does kind of, you know, get into your brain a little bit. And I was thinking, oh, my God, you know, are people going to think that I'm, you know, a bad mother for doing this? And it sparked a healthy debate.
A bad mother for having a baby. That's the irony, isn't it?
I know. But then by that stage, I'd committed. I was too far into it so I kind of just had to go, look, that's your opinion. If they read a little bit more about CML, they'd know that it wasn't hereditary. So I wasn't going to, you know, give birth to a baby boy who was going to have to deal with this himself. He's got just as much chance as I have of getting it.
Yeah, so it's not transmissible, which is amazing, isn't it?
I know. And, yeah, which makes me – that's one of the biggest things that I think about is what did it? Why me? Like, why did I get it?
Can anyone give you any answers?
No. They say it's just bad luck. And that's one of the things which has made me so determined to, I guess, not prove them wrong, but it really annoyed me that doctors were just like, just take the drugs. Take the drugs and that's it. Like, avoid grapefruit because it can, you know, mess with the drugs absorption. And I was like, but should I be eating differently? Is there something that I should avoid? Are there certain chemicals in my house that I should try and get rid of?
Because in some cases, leukemia can be triggered environmentally, can't it?
Yes.
By petrol, but just by filling up your current with petrol. Yeah. And or by radiation. Yes. And you talk about you write in the book about almost developing borderline orthorexia in terms of you became quickly really obsessed with what you were putting into your body. How did that sort of develop and play out for you?
Well, I think if I wasn't pregnant, I probably wouldn't have had that so much. But all I could think of was, oh my God, if I'm going to have a baby, I want him to be healthy. Like, it's too late for me to learn from any mistakes that I've made. So I'm going to give this kid the best start in life. And so I just became quite obsessive with, you know, what I cooked with, you know, things that I even kind of touched.
You talked about non-stick. You became fearful of non-stick pans, and in restaurants you wouldn't want anything put in a plastic container or
never got takeaway.
You wanted to go and inspect the saucepans in some restaurants that you went into, and you didn't want, you know, when you went in for your bone biopsy and you're in recovery and they just had like processed bread and plastic cheese and margarine and
I couldn't believe it.
When I was reading that, I thought, firstly, that makes a lot of sense. And secondly, it's about control, surely.
Yes.
It's like these things, so many things out of control are happening in my body. I can control something.
Exactly. Yes, it's so true. And that was a great distraction from the bigger issues that if I could just make sure that I lived my day, not eating anything that had chemicals or preservatives and things like that, then that would be a win for me that day. But I think it eventually got to the point where I'd start to work myself up about it. And so I realised that the stress that I'd put myself under and all of these extra decisions that I had to make probably wasn't great for my cortisol levels and for the baby.
Going, I'm so worried about my cancer that I'm going to give myself more cancer by being so stressed about my cancer.
That's right. That's what it felt like. And you've also got these two, especially after I had Tor, and I still have this kind of, my brain's torn between two things like YOLO, you only live once, have the extra wine, and hang on, you've got cancer. Yes, there's resveratrol in there, but, stop with the alcohol and literally go and sit on a mountain and meditate for the rest of your life. So it's like there's always a bit of a war going on in my head with every choice I make.
Has it made you look at your work differently?
Oh, yes, very much so. I mean, look, I still like what I do.
And there's nothing wrong. Like, you're good at what you do. And there's nothing, like, not everyone to be good at their job or to contribute to the world has to be Malala.
No, I mean, that's right.
Go Malala.
Yes.
Thank God she's out there doing her thing, and there are lots of other people who are doing their thing. But it's also nice to sometimes just read entertainment news or be brought, gossip or information about Kim Kardashian's new fragrance. Yes. That does actually serve a purpose. So don't beat yourself up about that.
No, and I think but the great thing about myself now is that I feel more like I've got a purpose. Being a mum, which has given me a lot of purpose, but I've also started studying naturopathy because I wanted to find out, I wanted to make sure that I can give Tor the best, the best diet and the best lifestyle, just to, so that I just don't want the same thing to happen to him, whether it's the same thing or not. And I don't want to project all of my insecurities on him, but you know what I mean?
Every mother does to some extent.
That's
but
true.
I know what you mean. Therapy will be good for that.
Yes, exactly. But look, so I'm really interested in the whole field of nutrition and herbal medicine and alternative medicine.
And to be fair, in the book you said you were doing that. You'd started this course before you even found out any of this, before that fateful 48 hours that you had. When I was watching the second 60-minute story that you did, and it was very much, and Tor's born, and hasn't it been wonderful, and it was all worthwhile, and isn't it great, and you took the risk and it paid off happily ever after, it occurred to me that your story could be co-opted by anti-abortionists to say why women should never terminate.
Yes.
Any pregnancy, even if their life was under threat. Look how well it worked out, and would you want to abort a gorgeous little baby like Tor?
Yes, that's right. Look, it's, I guess, something that I hadn't really thought of when it came out, but there was an occasion where I met a friend of my family who invited me to actually speak at their church, and when they initially said, we'd love you to come to talk about your story, I thought, that's lovely. I'd love to do that. And they said, they're very pro-life, and they were really, thankful that you were, helping to promote that. And in my mind, I thought, hang on, no. I am completely pro-choice, and I think it's such a personal decision for anyone to make. And I don't want everyone – you're right. I don't want everyone to think that it turns out beautifully. There has been so many people, in my CML forum groups as well who have been struggling with their fertility and things like that, and also who, as well, just general cancer, who didn't make it. I actually, was approached on Instagram by this guy the other day. I get very emotional thinking about it. His wife had colon cancer. And she ended up being diagnosed late in her pregnancy, and she had this beautiful little girl. And then a year and a half later, she died. And he was left his mid-30s with a little baby to look after. And I was like, I was so lucky, but I'm one of the few lucky ones, you know what I mean? And it doesn't all turn out rosy. And so that's one thing that I hope that my story doesn't influence someone in that way. I think everyone's got to do what's best for them, listen to their doctors, and then make the decision based on, their gut, the information that they have out there, and just common sense as well.
In fact, during your pregnancy, Nick found a woman because you guys were desperate to try to find, you joined Facebook groups, you put the word out through the Leukemia Foundation to try to find another living example of a woman who'd been diagnosed with CML when they were pregnant, and what they'd done and how it had turned out. And he uncovered the story of a woman in Perth, and she was a mother of 4, and she had in her 4th pregnancy she was diagnosed with CML. And you tried to reach out to her through the Leukemia Foundation, and she came back with an answer that upset you at the time, but I wanted to ask you if it makes more sense now, saying, I don't want to talk to you until you've made your decision, because you were still in the very early stages.
Yes.
Because she said, I don't want to be responsible for making Elle decide either to have the baby or not to have the baby. I mean, the chances were after you spoke to her, you'd be more likely to have the baby. And then she would feel responsible if it didn't work out well.
Yeah, that's so true. And I guess if I was in the same position, I would say the same. I don't know whether or not the Leukemia Foundation might have counselled her on that as well. But yeah, it was, speaking to her was so brilliant. But knowing that I'd decided to make that choice already did help a lot. And it was great to know what I was possibly going to have to deal with. And one of the biggest things that she did say to me was, you might seem like you've got this under control right now, but it's when you have the baby and everything seems like it's worked out that you will lose your shit, because you've spent the whole 8 months just concentrating on making sure that the pregnancy is okay and goes ahead, and you're not thinking about yourself. And it's only when you have the baby that you go, oh my God, now this is what I have to face. So
did that happen?
It did. The first few weeks after having Tor, I was kind of at first in that little bubble. And then when it came to starting the medication and all of that I had to, I guess, start my life anew as a mum and someone who has cancer. And I think that I'd been so preoccupied with just getting through every day that I hadn't really stopped and thought about what everything meant going forward, because I guess I'd had my little happy ending of having the baby and he was healthy, and that's what I was kind of focused on. And so now it was all about me, and I guess that was just hard to deal with.
How did it play out?
It was a bit rough those first few months. Like, I'd go from these incredible highs, being able to hold my little boy in my arms and, just being a mum and being in that mother's bubble, and then to also freaking out just about, what this new medication was going to do to me. And, little things like I went to get a massage and I had to fill out this form, and I was so used to just ticking no in all the boxes, and I wrote CML, like I wrote leukemia, and the guy's like, oh, I just don't think I can, because you've got blood cancer. I just don't want to massage you. And I thought, my God, like, just all of these little things that I hadn't thought about were now part of my life. And you know what I mean? Like, I can't get travel insurance now. Or, I can get a certain form, I could get accident, but obviously I can't get certain ones, and it's a lot more expensive. And just those little daily things in life that just change. You go from person X to person Y, and it's an adjustment.
And I think also being pregnant, your identity is so much as a pregnant person. I mean, it's signaled to the world you're pregnant. It's the only time that you're sort of going to the doctor or going to the hospital where you're not sick. You're actually the opposite of sick. You're like abundantly, hopefully, well, and you've got this new life inside you. And then when that, I guess, having to make that shift from being this incredible vessel of life to when your cancer was literally on hold, or your treatment as a cancer patient was on hold, to being a cancer patient.
Exactly.
Huge shift.
And also being cared for to being a carer. If you know what I mean. Everyone was
Tell me about that.
like, oh my gosh, are you okay? Can I,
When you were
do things
pregnant.
for that? Yeah. And then, I mean, afterwards, people were like, can I mind the baby? And I was like, what about me? I'm
got
feeling like
cancer.
shit today, guys.
Cancer.
I've been pulling chunks of my hair out. I've got this crazy rash all over my body. And yeah, so that was also another element.
I just wanted to end by asking you, I've always wondered, if you're at home alone in a house and you hear a little noise and you suddenly, all your senses become alive to the noises in the house and you can kind of suddenly hear everything.
Yeah.
Is that what it's like inside your body in terms of every twinge, every bit of tiredness, every ache or pain? Are you constantly like scanning your body for symptoms?
All the time. Yeah. Like if I get a bruise, I'm like, oh my God, have my levels gone up or things like that? And, I'll go to the doctor for stuff. And yeah, every kind of doctor's visit brings up a new little surprise about my health that I'm kind of having to get used to.
How do you manage that? Because you can't live in a state of crisis all the time. Your adrenal levels couldn't support it.
That's true. But the problem is as well, now I do it with Tor. So any, little runny nose and stuff, I'm like, oh my God, I've got to get him checked out. So that's...
And what role does Nick play in all of that?
He's very grounding. He's very good at putting things into perspective and going, hang on, like there was like 8 other children at daycare with snotty noses. I think it's just a cold. I'm like, okay. And he does.
That's also new to Mother Normal stuff too.
Yeah, well, that's right.
Again, even without cancer, you would probably be feeling that way.
Exactly, and that's the weird thing. I'm literally going through everything at the same time. So to separate the two is almost impossible. That's what's been such a strange experience for me, is just not knowing, what's, sickness related or what's mum related.
Where's your leukemia at now?
On paper, 0.0051% detectable. So
That sounds like almost nothing. Can we not just say nothing?
I know, I'm so close, so close. And every 3 months when I go in, it went from like nearly 1%, nearly 0.1%, and then it went down again. And so you kind of every time you go in there, it's different. But I went from a high of, I think, 27% down to this tiny little figure. So it's there. It's always there. But it's not kind of impacting my life, to the extent that I can't live it.
When it hits 0, are you cured?
No. So my chromosomes are still in the weird place. And I guess that for me, this kind of, and I hate to say the word, like this journey.
I think you get to say it's a journey.
Thanks. But learning about health and wellness, I would love to be able to get those chromosomes to go back to normal, because that would mean that I'm cured. I don't think it's happened maybe like a handful of times in the world. I'm not sure. I haven't seen much research that shows that there's evidence that you can do it. But I'm pretty determined to try and, see if I can. That would be amazing, being able to, change my chromosomes back. I figure if they could change in the first place, got to be able to swap them back.
Yeah.
So
Come on,
I
doctors.
like a challenge.
That's right. Come on, chromosomes.
Yeah, that's right.
Sort your shit out.
Yeah. So that's the aim.
Elle, congrats on the book. It's a fantastic read. Congrats on your beautiful boy. How old is he now?
16 months.
Oh.
I know. And it's my cancerversary this weekend.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Thanks.
I'm so thrilled for you.
Thank you.
You've never met a more radiant, glowing person than Elle Halliwell. Like, if you had to just put sunshine in the form of a human woman, it would be her. She's tall. She's got this beautiful, just flawless skin, beautiful hair. And again, not that this is the most important thing, but I think that sometimes when you hear the fact that someone's got cancer, you imagine something very different. And because this is a podcast, I wanted to sort of describe the physicality of what she's like. She just looks completely healthy. She's a really normal, healthy weight. and she just kind of radiates a glow. You can buy Elle's book, and I really recommend you do. She's a lovely writer, and I read the whole thing in bed on a weekend over a few hours. It's a really terrific read. Her book is called A Mother's Choice, and you can buy her book at any good bookstore, or there's a picture of her with her little baby boy on the cover. Tor, what a gorgeous name. Or you can go to apple.co/Mamma Mia, where you can buy all the books of all the amazing guests we have here on No Filter. Go back, check out the back catalogue. There are some fantastic other stories. And if you enjoyed this one, you should also go and check out my interview with Barry Dubois, who's another extraordinary person who is battling cancer. And like Elle, he's decided that he's absolutely not going anywhere. And I believe them both. No Filter is produced by Eliza Ratliff, and I will see you at the homepage, mamamia.com.au. Bye.